see some new faces joining us for the session today. It's Climate Week in Boston, first ever Climate Week, so thanks for spending it with us. We're lucky today to have Chris and Eric here from the Green Engineer. For those of you who aren't really up to speed on LEED or haven't touched it in a while, 4 was a little stale. You know, we've seen like a big drop off in LEED projects, but 5.1 is pretty transformative and raises the bar quite a bit. So we're lucky to have Chris and Eric here today to walk us through it. I'm not going to read their bios because we'd probably run out of time for their content. These guys are both pioneers. They've been around pushing, you know, behind the scenes on codes and ASHRAE standards and advocacy for, you know, a lot of behind the scenes and board work. And then also they've been involved in a lot of notable projects in Massachusetts and across the country, like you see there on the screen. So look forward to your presentation. And just really quick before we get started, just logistics stuff. There are 2 bathrooms out in the lobby if you need to use the bathroom, and a couple down in the kitchen. CEUs, if you need CEUs, Kim, right? Freshly minted LEED AP over there. What do we do? We're going to sign self-report, so we'll sign. You guys can sign up.
Yeah, so we can do 2 things. If you're looking for like AIA or other CEUs, self-report, we can give you the learning objectives and a copy of the slides.
Okay.
And if you're GBCI reporting, we actually can report for them. Yeah. So we would need to get a list of the GBCI number and the email associated with that, and then we can report this session.
So if you don't have your GBCI number, you can just email it in to us, or we'll reach out.
Right, and we'll get a list eventually, and we'll figure that out. But or you can self-report with that too. It's I don't think it's going to get you a LEED specific hour, even though it's about LEED.
And then real quick, if you got, you guys can run the show however you want. If you want to, like, questions during or after.
We're going to have a quiz at the end, so you can't leave the room until you get it right.
All right. Well, so listen up then. Take some notes. All right. So yeah.
Great. Well, thank you, John.
Cool. Yeah, thanks. Thanks so much. We really are happy to be here. We're going to start with a little quick commercial about us, the Green Engineer. We're a sustainable design consulting firm. Actually, last week was our 21st anniversary. So we've been around a while. We're 20 people. We're located in Concord, Massachusetts, and we do work all around New England and other places in the world. If you got projects there too, we're happy to work on those. And we do green building certifications of all kinds. And we also work with the Mass Save program and do a lot of work around energy. So whether it's energy simulation or just getting incentives, we can help you with that. Passive House, LEED, WELL, Fit Well, Living Building Challenge. Are there other certifications? I think that's all of them. Yeah. Enterprise Green Communities, we can do that one too. We're a B Corp. We're just labeled. This is the kind of stuff we do. These are some of our projects, and happy to talk more about all that stuff. I'm Chris. I'm the founder. Eric was the first employee back in 2006. Yeah. So it's been 20 years with Eric and I doing this, and ups and downs through the years. But we're here, and there's our contact. And if you have any questions afterwards, we'd love to chat with you. So what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about what's in LEED v5. Folks here generally familiar with LEED. How many people are LEED APs? Okay, a lot of people are LEED APs. So we're not going to give you like what is LEED stuff. It's more of what's changed and what's new, the exciting stuff in there. So we're going to look at the major changes and then talk about some of the strategies that we're seeing people use. And I think really one of the focuses is how LEED has changed its goals, right? So it's gone from general green building to some very specific goals around things like decarbonization and human impact.
But we do want this to be a discussion, so please, if you got any questions as we run through here, just raise a hand, chime in. Let's make this not just talking at you.
Can you just inform me, if you have a question, they have the mic in the back, otherwise, because they're videoing it, and the only way to get it.
And we'll also repeat the question, but if you got a mic, that's great. And so we want to start with just real quick that, so we're USGBC education partners, and so we're using some materials that are produced by USGBC as part of this, and so thank you to USGBC for letting us do that. A lot of our office has been involved in the development of LEED version 5. I was on the Energy and Atmosphere Technical Advisory Group, and we've had others involved with some of the other technical advisory groups. So really kind of insider knowledge on some of the things that are here in LEED version 5. So here are some of the major changes that they've talked about. The first is that there's going to be, the plan is a more predictable cycle of when LEED updates. So the plan is every 5 years now. Version 4 came out in 2013,
Right, and as
2012
John
actually.
mentioned, a little stale now, right?
You know, so it's been around for 13 years and they haven't really updated it very much, but now the idea is we've got version 5 came out in 2025. We're going to have version 6 in a few more years, so it's going to be every 5 years doing that. And then just where things are as far as version 5. Right now, version 5 has been out for a year, but there's been a, what's called a concurrency period. And that concurrency period ends June 30th, 2026. So if you have a project that's pursuing LEED version 4 and it's not registered, get it registered. If you have a project that is going to pursue LEED and you're not exactly sure where you want to end up, you might want to register under version 4 just to give you the opportunity. You can always upgrade later. You know, so some of our clients are already on version 5, especially like if we're working with public schools. The MSBA is going to require everybody to be version 5. If they haven't already voted that, that's happening in the next month. And you know, other folks, especially on sort of the private side, are locking in their version 4 so that they have a little easier target to get
And there's
to.
some time available, right? If you do the lock-in in version 4, you have until 32, June of 32.
It seems like that's like 100 years in the future, right?
To submit.
Yeah, okay. So, you know, the big picture summary of changes, we're going to go through these in a little more detail, but more emphasis on carbon and especially whole life carbon. So we're looking specifically at decarbonization, both operational carbon, also the embodied carbon, and the carbon that comes along with transportation. And then they've organized the whole rating system into 3 impact areas. So decarbonization is one, ecological conservation and restoration is kind of what's always been there, and the third piece is quality of life. And the idea is this is really getting towards that triple bottom line, that sustainability is not just how we protect the environment, but also how we treat people. And there's also the aspect of money. Wasting money is not a sustainable strategy, and that's not the intent in any of this either. Resilience comes into play. Back 25 years ago when I was first working with LEED, if you talked about resilience, you were admitting defeat. I guess we lost that battle because now we're worried about resilience because it's not, are we going to stop climate change? It's how can we survive this stuff? And then the other big change is that they've really raised the bar, especially for platinum projects. So that you'll find that getting the LEED certified is probably not that much harder than under version 4, but getting the LEED platinum is a lot higher, a lot harder, a lot higher bar now. What's good news for us here in Massachusetts is that LEED version 5 is kind of caught up with a lot of the local regs, and we'll talk more about that, but especially alignment around the energy code is very good here. Some of the local regs around embodied carbon line up very nicely with LEED version 5, so it's going to make that easier. So as I mentioned, there's 3 different impact areas in version 5. It's interesting how this has evolved. Back in version 3, they had 14 impact areas. 13 of them were something called the Tracy principles, which were all just environmental impacts like eutrophication and ozone and things like that. And then there was a 4th one called indoor environmental quality. They went to version 4, had 7 different impact areas. Version 5, we're down to just these 3. So I mentioned them already: quality of life, decarbonization, ecological conservation and restoration. And what we'll see is many of the credits try to address multiple here. It's not just one or the other, but as far as weighting of points, about 50% of the points are around decarbonization at various levels. So some examples of things in the decarbonization bucket. Operational carbon, so this is going to be the carbon associated with the energy consumption of the building, and so that gets into things like electrification, reducing loads. Embodied carbon, that's still the materials, so building reuse, picking the right products, diverting waste, and then also transportation carbon emissions, so transportation demand management, electric vehicles fit into that. Similarly, in the quality of life, specific areas include resilience. And so part of the requirements now are going to be an integrated process credit that's a prerequisite for doing a resilience assessment for your project. Lines up very nicely with the city of Boston, Cambridge, Many of the NEPA requires you to do a resilience plan, look at the impacts of climate change, so it lines up nicely with that. Health and occupant experience, these are things that have been there before. They've kind of regrouped some of these credits to occupant experience, enhancing their quality. And then equitable outcomes, and this is one of the things that's been interesting is the names changed a little bit in the last few years because of the politics. So trying to let everybody play, but looking at equitable development, accessibility is part of the whole thing now as well. And just looking at the human impact are things they're going to look at there. And then finally, the ecological conservation and restoration, very similar to what we've seen in the past. So we're looking at land use and stormwater and efficient resource use. Those are all parts of that approach there.
Right, so some of the things haven't changed in version 5. Still have the same certification thresholds. You're certified silver, gold, and platinum, with the note that the platinum is much more challenging. It's still structured in the same way with some of the mandatory prerequisites and then optional credits. You get credit points to achieve your certification levels. They have increased the number of prerequisites, and we'll touch upon a lot of those as we run through today. And they've also changed the reporting, how you actually document compliance with LEED. If you've ever had experience with LEED Online, they're transitioning to their ARC platform now. What that allows for is it's a little bit more of a living platform too. There are some requirements on reporting energy and water use data that's always been in LEED, but really clunky in the delivery, and ARC is kind of making it such that they're going to be able to report that information.
I think part of what
much more.
USGBC is trying to do is break down the barrier between the design and construction side and the operational side. So hopefully you'll use what you submitted in the design and construction process in the ongoing operations, and it could be if you want to recertify, for example.
Right, LEED used to be very much a snapshot in time around the design and construction process, and then once, day one operation, well, you're a certified project, but away you go. They're trying to bridge that gap. There we go. Previously in version 4, there were a number of different adaptations for different project types and groups. They've streamlined that process and really boiled it down to the building design and construction for both just a new construction and a core and shell building, and then a commercial fit out system, an operations system, and then one for greater cities.
So I've got to ask, does that mean you can't do a school with LEED anymore?
Well, what they've done, it's like we've done this before, is the innovation section at the end of LEED has been beefed up. There are more possible points, and what they've actually done is put project-specific credits. So some of those ones that were more focused around schools in particular that used to be in that rating system are now found in this innovation and project priority section, along with all the strategies that you used to do, doing something exceptionally well, something innovative out that is not a LEED credit, some of the pilot credits that they're beta testing, and then just those regional priority credits. Chris already mentioned this.
This is a big deal.
Yeah, this is a big deal. So to hit LEED Platinum certification now, it's not just hitting that point threshold, it's hitting that plus maintaining a minimum points in certain credits of impact. And basically that's around a super efficient building that's all electric, that offsets its energy use through renewable technology, either on-site or off-site, and has shown a demonstrated reduction of at least 20% in embodied carbon in the building design.
So those first three, that's all the available points. So you're getting all the energy points. You're getting all the electrification points and all the renewable energy points to get the platinum.
It basically is driving platinum towards a net zero building, right? There's some similar requirements for the existing buildings thing. One thing to note as we transition through, well, I just magically did it.
How'd you do that?
As we go through here, we're going to be focusing a lot on that building design and construction piece, the kind of the full building.
Well, I think that's what most people in the room are typically working on. You're designing or building a new building, or renovating a building that's complete renovation, and so that would fit into the BD and C.
This is just a snapshot of the scorecard that they've distributed again by those impact areas. This is another way to kind of show decarbonization is loaded with the most credits and the most available credit points. Just a way to show it all together.
But they still have categories, and then they do that as well. So you can cross.
And what we're going to do now is to drop into those categories, and we're quickly flying through time already. So what we're highlighting again is just some of those key elements that have been updated. A lot of them around the new prerequisites and the new way of thinking. A lot around some of these additional assessments that are required that are a little different. That we think that the industry has to understand as we launch into V5.
Right. But so if there's something you want to hear more about, raise your hand. We're ready to talk more about it, but if we talk at depth about all of them, we'd be here till tomorrow at noon. So we're ready to talk about all these in any depth you want, but ask questions. So first category is the IP integrated process credit category. In version 4, there was just one credit for integrated process. That's been expanded. There are 3 mandatory early assessments and then some optional credits. So throughout, you'll see this little mapping. Here's our version 4 scorecard. Here's our version 5 scorecard. So there's still only 1 point, but there's these 3 extra prerequisites now. So the first one of these is a climate resilience assessment. And for this one, you're going to look at the hazards to the particular property. And so those could be things like sea level rise would be a popular one in Boston, or it could be risk of wildfires, or it could be earthquakes, or whatever kind of resilience things, higher temperatures, all of these
extreme weather
things.
Conditions.
But the idea is you've got to assess your particular project and identify what those hazards are. That's the whole effort here, is the planning. It's thinking about what are the risks that we have for this particular project. Second one is the human impact assessment. So here LEED wants you to look at where your building is and what's in the neighborhood. And so this is, who are the people who live nearby, who are your neighbors, who's going to build the building, right? That's important too, is who's actually working on this project. And you're looking at equity and human health impacts.
That's folding in that human impact, that health, that impact area.
So this website's pretty cool. USGBC has, you can look up a site and it'll tell you like you have bad air quality in this neighborhood, or there's a Superfund site.
I decided to grab noise from transportation
there's noise from transportation. So that might be something you think about as you're next to the pike. Mm-hmm. And then the last prerequisite is a carbon assessment. And so for this one, what we're asking you to do is a 25-year carbon projection, starting with the business as usual. And we'll come back and talk more about what you might do with this. But this basically makes itself out of a prerequisite in the energy category we'll talk more about. But the idea is to project the 25 years of carbon emissions from the project, operational, embodied, and also transportation.
Yeah, and this is where the USGBC is really building a tool that takes the data that you give it to show you this overall lifetime impact, and the intent there is to start making decisions to reduce that impact.
Yeah, one of the things we're seeing a lot more these days is people are asking about embodied carbon, and Amy, yes?
I was wondering, is it of a baseline design, or is it?
So what happens in the operational side of things is you have a business as usual or baseline, and then what you're doing to go down from that. And similar kind of thing in the embodied carbon, and I actually don't know exactly how that works in the transportation piece, whether there's a baseline in there. But yeah, it's creating some kind of a typical based on your location.
Yeah.
And then the prerequisite is just the planning, just being it's not actually asking you to hit any targets, it's just asking you to figure out what the impact is.
So then transitioning to the next category here, the location and transportation, this is moving away from like what is a good location to really focusing on the impacts around transit, recognizing the carbon impact associated with transportation to and from buildings. And they've also folded in that equity piece here. And they've actually pulled some of the points available in this category and shifted them into higher impact areas around energy and actually materials as well. And they've made some changes, the little ones like, oh, you don't have to do the shower when it doesn't make sense. So a little flexibility in response to kind of what works best in real life here. Again, the mapping here, you can see they've compressed some of the credits, so there's less of them. You can see where they've mapped from 4 to 5. And let's look at a few of these. This is now one of the new credits here, but what it's done is kind of squished some of the old credits together. But you can see that it's got some new elements that have never been in LEED around supporting the local economy in a different way through either job creation or affordable housing. Yeah. And they also have skills-based elements here, which is particularly important for Chapman and construction managers. You've got some skills training for your teams. You're eligible for some additional LEED points here.
I mean, I'll ask a question. Does that that's something you're already doing on projects? So does it give somebody like Chapman an advantage to pursue a LEED V5 project, maybe?
Yeah, well, it depends, on, let's see.
So this one in particular, these bullets.
Yeah, so is that talking about Chapman employees or subcontractors?
Yes, and.
Total construction hours. So
I guess we do routine training for our people at certain intervals throughout the year for the whole, but we don't necessarily have a job-related skills training program.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because I think there's some overlap too with if people have been doing any of the projects that are getting some of the federal tax credits that still exist around things like ground source heat pumps, for example, with meeting prevailing wage and workforce training. You need to do those things to hit the maximum reimbursements. So there's some alignment there, I think. It's interesting. It's not something people have ever thought about before in a LEED project, except maybe somebody who's doing that as an innovation credit.
Right. And so transportation demand management it's a new credit here as well. This does have some of the elements that we've seen historically, but it does require the development of a transportation demand management plan for a project. This is again where it may play nice with local regulatory requirements. A lot of this is required in Boston. You can just use that for your LEED purposes. But then it does include some of the elements that we saw before about showers and biking, and they're adding some bike maintenance elements to it too, which is I like as a biker who may or not need a Allen wrench now and again. So that's the quick summary of location and transportation.
Yeah, so next we'll jump into sustainable sites. Back in version 4, they split apart sustainable sites into those two pieces, location and site. So this is more the things that the civil engineer might be looking at. And so resilience has become part of this, and it's gone away from minimize impact to restore. So kind of as opposed to do less bad, more regenerative is the idea in all of this. So you can see again the mapping. We actually get an extra point in sustainable sites, but most of the credits are easily identifiable in the new credits, except for this enhanced resilient site design. So this looks a lot like something you might have seen in earlier versions of LEED, preserving greenfield sites or bringing back a previously disturbed site. One new item that's been a credit in the past as an innovation credit is the bird-friendly glass. So that's a credit now in LEED for all projects. And then other parts that are new, I think it's interesting, they're looking at community outdoor space. So it's not necessarily the outdoor space that your project provides if it's part of a larger community approach. And so publicly accessible during daylight hours. You guys kind of have that here with your ball field and tennis court right behind.
But you can see how they're trying to push the boundary of LEED a little further away from just the project itself to really think about the community and support and how to be a good neighbor.
Yeah, and then the one that's new is thinking about resilient site design. So this is the idea of you're building at the coastline, and how do you build a site that absorbs the high tide, for example, or in extreme heat, making sure that your plantings are actually drought-tolerant plantings, or fire, making sure you're not building the exploding fire plants next to your building, things like that. So that's in.
So moving on, right? We're into the water efficiency credit now. What they're trying to do here is kind of wrap everything, all water, into a bigger umbrella. They are recognizing some new ways to look at water that are different that we'll get into. And they've removed some of the challenging elements that the water sense labeling. This has been a problem for more unique fixture types that other LEED projects have addressed. And they've added a new element around water metering and leak detection. Again, they're doing this again for not only being efficient with resources of water, but also thinking about the energy that goes into delivery and cleaning and treatment of the water in our systems. There was a interesting stat that I should almost dropped in here about if you run your faucet for something like 15 minutes, it's the equivalent of running a 60-watt light bulb for 2 weeks, which is you don't think about. And so they're trying to make that connection.
Water has a carbon footprint too.
Yeah, that connection of the water, the carbon footprint of water. But what you can see, squish. They moved a lot of things into one credit to look more holistically, and it's really around this credit of enhanced water efficiency here, where they've got options galore, and they've brought in these holistic pieces, this whole project water. You look at everything together, that gives you the most points if you're able to think holistically. If not, you can look at things individually, and there are individual points available for project teams there. They're really promoting water reuse in a way that's different here. That will be interesting to see how the market responds to that.
Cool, all right. And hey, energy, so this is my favorite category. I worked on this a lot. I think it's the most transformed category. And so a principle that the developers of LEED version 5 followed through all the categories, but certainly was affecting our work with energy, was to think about what do we want the building of the future to look like? Thinking about a building in 2050 or beyond. And so Buckminster Fuller did that, of course, but not everybody wants to live in a geodesic dome. But instead we came up with 3 elements of decarbonization that are key. The first is electrification. The second is load reduction, and the third is energy efficiency. And if you heard like Paul Ormond or somebody else from the state of Mass talk about the stretch energy code in Massachusetts, the same basic idea. So we're really following that. And here's the mapping of the credits, and there's a lot of arrows going a lot of places, but we're addressing all the same things. But the first thing to talk about again is the prerequisite. So we've got an operational carbon projection decarbonization plan. So we're going to do modeling or some other way to benchmark to establish a goal for the project and understand how much energy we expect to use. And then from that, we're going to create a carbon projection. So we're going to look at the emission factors today, but also into the future and see where we're headed. And then as part of this decarbonization plan, so either the building itself will be decarbonized by 2050. If we're all electric and using renewables, that'll happen. Or we're going to think about how a future user of the building will decarbonize. So if we are putting fossil fuels into the building, how are we going to change that out at some point in the future? What's the plan for doing that? And this creates at least a 25-year plan, and that feeds back into that overall carbon plan for the project that we talked about in the integrated process credits. Second prerequisite is minimum energy efficiency. And here's good news that it's now aligned with the Massachusetts code. LEED version 4 had been referencing ASHRAE 90.1 2010. I know everybody studies all the ASHRAE standards and knows all these things. But now we're 2019, which is the same one that the state of Massachusetts uses for part of the stretch code. And the thing that's built in now is that we're automatically going to go to the next version. 3 years after it's, well, actually 6 years, I guess, after it's adopted. So ASHRAE 90.1 2022 came out in actually 2023, because ASHRAE gets a little behind. And so if you're doing a LEED project that registers after January 1st, 2028, you're going to have to go to 22. Also, previous versions of LEED had stuck with the metric of energy cost. So we've seen a lot of projects in places like Massachusetts where we're switching out fossil fuels for very efficient heat pumps. Electricity costs more than gas, so we're not necessarily showing it a cost savings. So there's been some workarounds, but now it's in the it's in here. We're looking at carbon, and there's some customized methodology. So this is in the weeds for people who run energy models, but There's a different method that ASHRAE uses, and there's some custom factors that are specific to LEED. So actually the metric is source energy, not cost, but it's a source energy with a future-looking metric. So it's going to support electrification and low carbon design. You're also going to calculate the carbon. So then the one big energy credit, in this case, we've split it into 3. Everywhere else we've been taking credits and mushing them into 1. Here we split it into 3. 5 points for electrification. Option 1, no on-site combustion. You get 5 points. So guess what? If you meet the opt-in code in Massachusetts, you're going to meet that. Option 2, you can get 1 to 4 points depending on what you electrify. So even if you're not all electric, as long as you're using fossil fuels only when it's cold out, you can get additional points. So the one piece here is the cooking and the process loads. Yeah,
Question.
What about for process buildings?
A process building still gotta, if you want option 1, it's gotta be all electric.
Water treatment plant,
What's that?
like a water.
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting one, a water treatment plant, and it's using fossil fuels in what way?
Pumps. Not, so full electrification for building, heating, cooling, everything, but I guess for backup pumps.
Oh, yeah, backup.
So there's the
backup is
backup
okay. You're allowed to have a generator.
Even
right?
for the electrification, a standard
Yeah.
generator can still be a fuel source other than
And
electricity.
this is not a prerequisite, it's a
Yeah.
credit. So if you don't get all these points, it's okay, except that you need to get all of option 1 if you want to be platinum. Yeah, you gotta be fully electric if you want to be platinum. That's the first piece of gotta be platinum.
But again, all those other process loads, cooking and just standard process loads, those have to be electrified as well.
In option
under
1.
option 1.
And option 2, you could
Yeah,
get
if
points
not,
for other
you
parts
lose a
of it.
point. But you can see you have many fewer available points
Right.
than going for the full electrification intentionally.
The second part is reduced picothermal loads, and somebody in our office called this the child of Teddy and Fias. If you know what those things are, then you'll get that. So there are prescriptive options showing reduced peak loads, and there's also a calculation option where you can either follow Passive House or ASHRAE 9.1, and instead of looking at the reduction in total energy consumption, you're looking at the reduction in peak loads. And so again, thermal bridging is going to just line up really nicely with what the current state energy code is requiring us to do on thermal bridging. And also in this is another one, the air testing. So again, air testing not required, but you get points if you do it. Air testing is a requirement of the Mass Energy Code now for all new projects. So, it lines up really nicely there. All these things,
Infiltration.
I think, yeah, for infiltration. Exactly. And then the last piece is the enhanced energy efficiency. So again, one of the things that we tried to do as this was developed was to give equivalency in terms of the points available, whether or not you're running a model. We run models all the time. It would be great if you hired us to do models, but we recognize that that's not something every project can do. And it's been a barrier for some projects to pursue LEED because they needed a model to even show prescriptive, compliance with the prerequisites. And so here you have equal weight paths that are prescriptive or energy simulation. So prescriptive, basically you get points based on different strategies that might be incorporated up to a total of 10 points, or you can run an energy simulation up to a total of 10 points for that. And then finally, I think the last thing we're going to talk about is renewable energy. So in the past, we had the difference between on-site and off-site renewables. Those have been brought into a single credit, and now you just get different weighting, basically. So the best thing is on-site renewables, but if you have off-site renewables, depending on what they are, you get full or partial credit for that. So that means you can count that against your stuff. So, again, to get the 5 points here, you needed the 5 points to get to platinum. So, but if you're offsetting all of your electricity, whether on-site or off-site, and you have no fossil fuels, then you'll be able to do that. So net zero building, whether on-site or off-site, will qualify for that. So it's interesting because I think we see a lot of, especially our larger portfolio type clients are doing renewables often in a portfolio sort of way. We showed earlier the BU data center building, which BU it says is net zero. And their way to get net zero is it's all electric, it's energy efficient, and they're putting up wind turbines in South Dakota. So the wires don't connect South Dakota to Commonwealth Avenue, but in their, in their bookkeeping, they've got that all, and that works. That's what people do. So that's the big
Yeah,
piece
so
of
maybe
energy.
let's pause on energy for just a second to see if there is any other questions, because that is the beefiest credit category.
Yeah. And we skipped a couple things. There's
Yeah.
some discussion of refrigerants, which I know everybody loves to do that, and also credits for demand response and being grid friendly. And that's got some new language in it as well.
Okay. Moving on to the material and resources category, another one that it will be particularly of interest for the construction folks here is they have slightly adjusted this category. Version 4 really introduced some new concepts and some new documentation requirements to the industry that really did cause some waves and some headaches when it was originally introduced long ago. And that was really about these, EPDs, environmental product declarations, HPDs, health product declarations, and what they were looking for there is just reporting, disclosure, just give us that information. And that was their way to push the marketplace to start to create more of these and to really get the manufacturers to start disclosing the impacts of their materials. And so that was version 4, and now what they're doing is going a step beyond that. Now they're saying, okay, now you have to show that you're meeting certain criteria to actually be eligible for the points. It's not just about counting your EPDs anymore, it's about counting the quality of the EPDs and what does the EPD report. And then they're also looking more about some of the planning around how do you deal with waste a little bit more aggressively in building operation. And they actually did move the low emitting material credits, all your paints and coatings and all the stuff that you apply, and brought that from the indoor environmental quality up to the material and resources category, which makes some logical sense and really ties it together with this new common material framework that they're introducing as part of LEED version 5 that we'll get into in a little bit. But what they're really trying to do is really tie it back to health impacts and emission-related impacts of the materials here. Did you have something? No.
Yeah.
So
Common Materials Framework, who's heard of this, knows what we're talking about.
nice.
A couple people here. Okay.
Yeah. So this one's messy. This is the materials and the EQ together, only because we've got this guy that's escaped from IAQ, as I mentioned, the low emittings, and has been brought up into the material and resources category. Besides that, they have taken those BPDOs, they are building product disclosure and optimization credits, and pushed them into a credit that we'll talk about now. Well, not now. But one of the new things they're introducing in V5 is also a more robust requirements around embodied carbon, right? This is the carbon that we're going to lock into a building with the materials that we use and the construction methods that we use, right? So this is really looking at what are the carbon impacts associated with the sourcing, manufacture, transportation, and construction of the materials in our projects. This is wildly important because this is the carbon you're burning and you're putting into the building now, right? When operational emissions are future emissions, right? So we really, and LEED is really pushing to reduce and get folks to really think hard about the embodied carbon that goes into the buildings. And what they're doing is they've put a prerequisite here. There's no threshold to hit on reduction of your embodied carbon for this. That's linked to a credit, but they are doing a prerequisite that's making you do this study, right? And you can do it through a whole building LCA, which is its own computer simulation that takes all the impacts of materials and puts it into a whole, gives you a full picture of carbon impact, or you can do it through a prescriptive method that is using those EPDs, those environmental product disclosures, to quantify carbon in more of a prescriptive manner.
Yeah. One thing to note here too is that integrated process credit for carbon we saw back in there, prereq, this is feeding back into that as well. So these things are all linked.
Right.
It's set up as 3 separate actually kind of transportation, 4 separate prerequisites, but they all kind of fit together into that one big picture of the whole life carbon for the project.
And what they want you to do then, after you've done this initial study, is you identify your heavy hitters. You do that hotspot analysis. What are the materials that are most impactful from a carbon perspective? And for the prerequisite, it's all about just, what are you doing to address that? Give them some sort of narrative. They want you to start thinking this way as a prerequisite requirement. Again, no threshold to hit, but just forcing you to take that effort.
And one more thing that's worth mentioning here is you may have seen the city of Boston has been bringing embodied carbon requirements into zoning. Newton actually has done that. We did that here on a project in Newton. And the state has been talking about creating embodied carbon requirements for new construction as part of the next edition of the building code.
Right.
And so this is kind of putting you in a good place on that, and it's hopefully going to align with those requirements and with those.
Yeah, they're even, there's even around the mass save utility incentives, they're trying to figure out, like, can we incentivize embodied carbon in some way too? That's seemingly going to be the furthest one away, but again, it's where LEED is kind of helping or playing nice with some of what the
I mean, my hope is that as people create standards, they choose to align with LEED so that you could do the same thing in both places instead of having to do two different things.
Right.
One of the frustrations with version 4 lately has been that it's so old that you end up having to do one thing for that and something else entirely for your local regs.
So this is just the credit link to the prerequisite. Again, there's different options. This one will have you do a whole building LCA for the most available points, and there's some reduction requirements, and this is one of those platinum credits too, where you have to, if you do platinum, you have to do option 1, a whole building LCA, and you have to demonstrate that you've reduced by 20% to be eligible for that platinum piece here. But they do allow still for this EPD method. And then they also have this new requirement that, again, particularly important for CMs here, where they're looking at tracking the energy and carbon impact around construction itself.
Yeah,
this is already. Go ahead.
That'd be convenient. Like, I mean, what we see already is architects say, yeah, oh sure, the contractor will do all the recycling, and we count on those points, and now we can say, and we'll make the contractor do this too before we've hired the builder.
That's just transparency, there's no reduction required.
This is tracking. This is only tracking, right? Have you all done this on a project ever? You guys do that?
We started doing it,
Yeah.
electricity, and then we just track fuel on a project too.
You track transportation to and from of your folks?
Transportation is tough.
Yeah, it is hard, isn't it?
Like,
Yeah.
you don't know if the truck going from the factory to your job site is
Right.
stopping somewhere else. And
What's the mileage? It's hard. Yeah.
I was on one project, I don't know if others have done this, where the sign-in sheet at the construction meetings
Yep.
of the trailer, we had to write how we got to the meeting and where we came from, and somebody somewhere was adding that stuff up.
Mm-hmm.
Seems like
We're
the
tracking,
the least of the worries is
field reports, or just like, or the guys are checking in, everything comes to the job site. So instead of asking you, where's your house?
yeah.
Yeah.
Just using like their main office.
Yeah, that makes
Mhm.
sense.
It's like round trips
Yep.
for sites.
But that's got to be such a small number compared to like the embodied carbon of the steel and the structure, I would think.
Yeah, but it adds up when you have like
Yeah, all right.
60 people driving 40 miles.
Yeah,
Mhm.
Trucks
I can
back
see
and
that, all
forth,
right.
It's like much higher. We did
Mhm.
an analysis on a company fishing trip last year where we go down to the Cape, and it was, the emissions were like, what was it, I think it's like crushed our emissions for the entire year.
Oh no. Do you catch fish at least?
Catch fish.
Yeah, I think I saw it in the kitchen. The stripers. Is that what those you guys are going after? Good for you. So we mentioned this common material framework, right? This is kind of a conglomeration of different organizations: AIA, ILFI, WBI, all the word salad or letter salad here of different agencies that have come together to put together this common material framework, and they're really looking at, again, these areas of impact. around human health, circular economy, climate, social health and justice, and ecosystem health. And what they're now using is looking at how many of these different criteria do your products support. What are they doing in some way to lessen their impact and to support these particular areas of import. And so what they've done is fold that into the new material tracking credit, where this gets a little crazy, but they do have calculators to support this, where you're looking for multi-attribute materials, where a material may show a reduction in embodied carbon and have some social benefit, and so that's a multi-attribute material now. It will then contribute to achievement of this credit. Put it in a big spreadsheet, mix it all together, and based on how well you do, you get points based on that.
We can look at, if we have time, we can look at that in a little more detail at the end.
So a lot of this is around some of those third-party certifications that you know from a lot of materials, the Declare labels, cradle to cradle. There's a whole mess of them here. And again, this is where some of the logic of taking those low-emitting material credits, bringing them from EQ into materials, is that it's really looking at a lot of the same elements there, and so they're bringing together that low-emitting material piece to be part of this category. It's in a different credit, which we'll talk about next, but then you're looking not just at the emissions associated with those materials, but some of these common material framework elements as well. So low-emitting materials. What they've done here is just make you do more for less points. Again, that's part of the raising the bar here. So you do have to hit all of these first three on top in blue to just to get 1 point, and then you do have some options on other categories. What they did in LEED version 4 was introduce. Previous versions of LEED used to be about VOC, the content of VOCs in your materials. Version 4 introduced emissions, so it's not what's in the product, it's what comes out when you're applying. And so there was both in version 4, and they've gotten rid of the VOC content now in this latest version, and they just care about the emissions associated with the materials.
Yeah, that makes more sense.
Because that's really the impact to the installers and to the end users as well.
Right. Oh, this is going to be a favorite here.
Yeah, so construction, demolition, waste, diversion, right? They've actually tried to simplify this, but in doing so, it's going to prove to be a little more challenging to hit. And what they do, there's no prerequisite associated with the construction waste management plan. You just have to do it to get this credit. But what they've really done is there used to be all around number of streams, and they've kind of simplified that. But what they're really doing is really any sort of commingled waste. They're really dropping what you can say is recycled coming out of that. Yeah. You know, historically we got letters from the waste receiving facilities that they made some magic number of a percentage of what they recycle, and that was harder to verify.
It turns out that people think that was all BS.
Yeah, and so what they're saying is, if you're doing commingled, your percentage that you can claim is much less. You know, we used to see 90s out of those reports from some waste receiving facilities.
Some projects that had over 100%. Because they recycled
Picking
like
stuff up at the dump and pulling it.
they were like recycling the demoed materials from before the project somehow.
Yeah, you're right. So we did the MassDOT project right on the Pike, and the site was full of Jersey barriers from before the project.
They're recycling it the weight.
Yeah, and it was all by weight, and so man, did we nail it on that one.
And their recycling of the Jersey barriers consisted of putting them in a different part of the highway, I think.
Right. Sending them to Jersey. No. And what they're really trying to push for too is salvage and reuse here too. But this credit, while they streamlined it, is going to prove challenging to get both.
Well, I think honestly the recycling market has changed a lot. It used to be a lot of commingled waste was getting shipped overseas and something was happening and those countries have stopped taking this stuff. And so, we're seeing that like municipal recycling programs are costing more for the towns and getting less recycled than before, unfortunately. So reduce is the first thing, right?
Yep.
All right, so last category we want to talk about is indoor environmental quality. So human health, equity, and experience is part of this. We got rid of the materials, those are all in the materials category, and introduced a new prerequisite around something. So here's our diagram again. And so the prerequisite is around construction management. So that used to be a credit. You get the construction management IAQ plan and you make sure that happens, make sure you're delivering clean and dry. That's not prerequisite. And one of the things that's added is heat protection for the workers in the building as well. So probably less of an issue around here, but if you were building a building in Arizona, definitely want to be thinking about that. And then a lot of credits been combined. So enhanced indoor air quality that gets you increased ventilation or different air quality design.
And they're looking at some different compounds of concern here too. They're not just CO2, but PM 2.5, formaldehyde, and ozone. So bringing in again kind of a more holistic look at
a big alignment here with well,
air.
right? So they've created crosswalks between well and LEED. So if you're doing both on a project, you can meet the LEED requirements, it meets well, meet the well requirements, it meets LEED. So part of that is the air quality, not just designing for it, but testing, right? That's what you're doing here is you're testing for these pollutants at these levels. And then occupant experience. So these have brought a lot of things together. Some that we had before, like the thermal environment and lighting, combined with things that were maybe innovation credits in the past, like acoustics, and brand new things like a biophilic environment, an adaptable environment. So accessible spaces, part of that. What do we got in the pictures? The daylighting, and this is a person and all of their heat transmission to the world.
Yep.
So we, ASHRAE 55 standard, we still are trying to create a comfortable environment, giving people control. New credit around accessibility and inclusion. So being ADA compliant and whatever else you have to meet there. And then they have additional like stretch goals.
Yeah, they've got a bunch of categories or strategies that you can focus on. And again, this is looking more at human health and well-being here in a different way than LEED has done in the past.
Yeah, and then the last one I think we're going to talk about is the resilient spaces. So this is again talking about planning for resilience. And here, resilience from a few different options. So episodic outdoor ambient conditions, that's when you got wildfires and you can't breathe. We've all experienced that here in the last year, right? You get the smoke from the fires in Canada and you don't want to open your windows. So hopefully your building has got filters that you can do that, or the ability to put filters in that'll help with that. Management mode for respiratory diseases, what could that be? But now we want to think about how your building is going to deal with the next pandemic. Hopefully we don't have to do that. And then power outages and how you deal with power outages.
A little passive survivability piece there.
It just depends a lot on what the building is. If it's an office building and the power goes out, really all you want to do is be able to get people out of the building and then drive home or get home some way. But if they live there and the power's out for days, how do they flush the toilets and what's their temperature in the building and can people actually stay in this building? We want to design thinking about these things. Operable windows, my all-time favorite passive resilience strategy. That helps with COVID too, by the way, right? Everybody remember when buildings that couldn't open their windows, couldn't bring in any outside air, nobody wanted to be in those buildings. Got some operable windows, you can solve all these things. So wow, we got through that.
We did it.
In more or less.
So,
we do have a little handout with the cheat sheet and some contact info for us with this there, but take any questions and we can look at that material credit a little bit more if people want to look at that. And anybody else got anything? Is that all? Is ready? Yeah, Amy, please.
I saw asphalt was one of the materials that needs an EPD. I've never seen seen an EPD for asphalt. So I was just wondering, is that like concrete? Is it a local? You know, I just don't know.
So I think the way EPDs work, and Eric, you can correct me on this, but I think the way that works is you've got different, you have like manufacturer-specific EPDs, or you have material category EPDs.
Industry specific.
Industry specific. So you can basically, like you say, all asphalt has this, basically. It's what you're putting in there.
But yeah, again, they are trying to expand the, who's doing all of these testing of
But
materials
it's worth
as well.
going back and thinking, what is an EPD? So an EPD is actually a life cycle assessment of an individual product. So it looks at 6 categories. So the emissions from that is one, and then it also looks at, see if I can do this.
Yeah.
Smog, ozone depletion, overall energy use, eutrophication, and there's another one. Particulates, maybe? But anyway, so if everybody's asphalt is pretty much the same, then having a generic EPD for that material is enough that you can figure out how much you got, add up those numbers, and understand how much carbon is being used, which is part of what you're trying to do there. So it's okay. If you got some special product from some manufacturer, you definitely want to ask them for that EPD. But if it's something like concrete or asphalt, we can use those industry EPDs. What do you guys think? You guys ready to do V5?
Has anyone heard clients or anyone starting to talk about the next version of LEED? We deal with LEED all day and have one LEED for existing buildings under version 5, and we now have our first 2 K-12 schools that are moving into it. The operations and maintenance is really a better system than previous, and so it's logical to make that jump for building owners. Some of the schools are, as Chris mentioned in passing, the Massachusetts School Building Authority is pushing forward to require that sooner than others.
But we've had several projects who have either we've registered within the last month or 2, or they're planning to register the projects before the end of June.
Yeah.
Generally on the developer side. If
what we've seen in one of the big things that recently came out that we told all of our developer friends is any project, a large project review Article 80 in the city of Boston, after June 30th, when the rating system closes, if you submit your preliminary application to them, your PNF documentation, just introducing the project to the city, if it's after that June 30th date, tough luck. Even if you registered under V4, you have to follow V5 to meet the Article 37 green building requirements of the city. So that they're being quite aggressive in that new mandate.
Yeah.
So that 2032 date is doesn't matter. So if you register your project, you may be okay at USGBC.
Yeah.
But if it's in Boston,
So that's for the LEED certifiability piece of Article 37. We actually dealt with this in the previous, the V3 to V4 situation where project teams would register, they could still register under V4 and certify under V4, and that's fine, but you'd still have to demonstrate compliance with V5 for the city of Boston. There was a number of developers that were playing that game because the certification,
They wanted platinum.
Yeah, they wanted a higher level of certification when in the actual certification, but they still had to satisfy the city's requirements, so they did that kind of dual approach.
And then there was Fallon.
That, yeah.
I'm being recorded here, I probably should. But yeah, they made some kind of deal with Menino, and so they got to be under like old versions of LEED forever because they just got to be that way. So worked out well for them, Fanpeer.
we haven't been, I'd say we haven't really been hearing of people asking for LEED 5 yet, and I think that's because a lot of people are still wondering what is LEED 5.
Yeah.
You certainly start to see pieces and parts of what you went through
Yeah.
pop up on the projects, EPDs, HPDs,
Yeah.
waste diversion rates, all
Yeah.
that stuff, so.
Yeah. Well, I think our short story to clients is the regulations, if you're doing it to meet regulations, your window to get in under V4 is rapidly closing. If your sole interest is getting the highest rating you could possibly get, you want to try to get a V4 project. But otherwise, V5 is going to be better aligned with other regulations that you're having to deal with, at least here in Massachusetts. This is one of the struggles that the USGBC has as developers of a program like LEED. You get places like Boston and New York and California where they've got very stringent standards and LEED hasn't been keeping up. And then you've got other parts of the country and other parts of the world where it's a stretch to do even what's in LEED version 4. And so how do you create a rating system that provides incentives in both of those places and is useful? And so that's kind of the whole stretching out of making the distance between certified and platinum farther than it has been. I think if you look around, Boston, the buildings that have been built, nobody's building to certified. Not very often. It's gold or platinum for virtually everything. So, yeah, question in the back.
Do you feel that LEED 5 was built more upon a certain type of building, like for example labs because of the more energy consumption or size or?
Yeah, well, I think LEED has always been thinking about larger buildings and more, developer type things. And I think if you look at a lot of where USGBC is going, they're thinking about portfolios and building owners who have multiple buildings around the country or around the world, or large organizations that have spaces in all sorts of different places, and trying to figure out how to give a kind of solution to all those. And I'd say they've maybe in version 5 not done a very good job of addressing the multifamily market. The LEED for homes isn't part of this, and there's this whole confusion that's been in LEED forever about when is it LEED for homes versus when is it LEED for new construction. And so it's an interesting question. Right now. The city of Boston is saying, no, you have to do Passive House for code, and we still want you to do LEED. Cambridge says Passive House or LEED. And so I can definitely see that we'll see more of the multifamily move away from LEED and look at Passive House or enterprise green communities, especially if you're looking in the affordable. That's a big funding source. That's often a funding criteria that you.
And that's again where Passive House plays nicely.
Yeah.
Because there's incentives around that.
So, but we're in this total Passive House bubble here in Massachusetts because it's a code requirement. So everybody and their brother, including me, has gone through the Passive House training now, and we're all Passive House experts, although most of the Passive House experts out there have not actually done any projects. We've done 22.
And it's interesting to see I get the monthly emails from the FIAS folks about they announce all the design certified or the formal certified projects, and it used to be Pacific Northwest and a few little guys and this and that and more your unique projects, and now in the last handful of months, it's just like all multifamily Massachusetts projects. Because if you're in an opt-in community, that's your only path.
Right.
So Massachusetts is going to be
seeing like 600 unit apartment buildings in Revere that are going Passive House.
Have to
because they have to, right? And that use
there's
Avalon
no other way.
Type stuff that used to be kind of the worst construction out there.
But again, to answer your question in another way too, I think LEED's always been a little better for bigger projects. There gets to a point where for smaller projects there's a little more burden,
right.
a little more
we actually have
costly.
traditionally recommended the smaller projects not do LEED just because the level of effort for certification is not related to the size of the project. It's more related to the number of credits you're pursuing. And so
It's more expensive now to get for the same building type.
More expensive. So it's interesting when you talk about the cost of LEED. So I have a thought about this. So there's one cost is the certification fees, and those continue to kind of rise with inflation. And so that's what you pay to USGBC. A second set of costs are the consultants and the soft costs. What people like us, or even just the architect, what they're going to charge extra for it being a LEED project. There's definitely some costs there. It used to be that commissioning was a differentiator, that all LEED projects had to have commissioning, and a lot of projects didn't otherwise have commissioning, so that was seen as extra cost. I'm hopeful these days pretty much everybody's doing building commissioning, and it's required by our energy codes, although maybe not at the level you do it for LEED. So then the other piece is, what does it do to the construction cost? And that's where it's always been hard to figure out. It depends, because it really depends on the strategies that you're going to employ. I told the story, because I'm old now, it's an old story. The first 2 platinum buildings in the greater Boston area, anybody know what those were? Anybody that as old as me? So the Genzyme Center, which Genzyme doesn't even exist anymore, they're part of what, Sanofi or Takeda? Sanofi, I can't pronounce. But there's a fancy Danish building down in Cambridge, in Kendall Square. And then the other one that's still a really cool place is the Artists for Humanity Epicenter in South Boston. So both of those were platinum. So the Genzyme Center, their approach was, hey, that's cool, we'll take 2 for everything, right? So they've got the architect from Germany, they've got the double facades with the it's really cool daylighting system with the mirrors that track the sun and shoot the light down through the center of the building, and the automated shading that has 2 levels, one at the daylight level, another at your eye level to control glare, that came in a metric size, so they had to fit in a nice way. And then over at the epicenter, they actually just left out the air conditioning. That was their thing, is that we're just gonna leave it out. We're just gonna, if it gets too hot in here, we're just gonna go to the beach. And so,
and they have a lot of thermal mass. What they do is
but it was
cooling.
built with a night flush at thermal mass. It was an engineered system. And I had nothing to do with either of these projects, but it was interesting that one was built for, whatever the dollars per square foot, like a high number back then was. It was probably double that. And the other one was built on a shoestring budget by a nonprofit. So you could do it either way. And you can still do it either way, I think, with LEED version 5. It depends on what you want in your building. And the nice thing I think about energy efficiency, and especially as we reduce peak loads, and what we're learning with things like Passive House, is you put more into the building envelope and then your mechanical systems get smaller and simpler. And so it's maybe not a one-to-one trade-off, but it's not as, you got to make sure when you do the costing, you take the deducts as well as the adds, right? It's easy to say, oh, triple glazing, that's going to cost more, but you got to say, okay, smaller heating system, what do we save there? If we don't look at those things together, it's not going to work. And then throw in your incentives and your tax credits for your green stuff, and it's all good. Yeah, Bridget.
So considering the housing or building stock in Massachusetts with bigger, older buildings like mill buildings and old concrete buildings, where's the place, where does LEED see a place of existing buildings? I mean, you're saying the emphasis is more on new construction, but I mean, there's so much out there which would be great to.
Well, so that's a great point. And I mean, a lot of existing buildings have been certified when they've been renovated or retrofit. And there's opportunities there, and there are credits in LEED that are still there as we look at embodied carbon.
Yeah, a lot of that embodied carbon stuff.
The embodied carbon of the existing building. I think if you've got a building that's occupied and you're just trying to go for a green building certification, then that's when you look at the existing buildings O&M. And that looks at your actual energy consumption and your actual processes that you've got ongoing. So generally the opportunity, if you're doing something that's going to require a building permit, you also have an opportunity to do something that you could do LEED for new construction or for interiors. But if you're just doing normal operations and you want a green building certification, then that's where you look at the LEED for O&M. And generally, I think on that, what we see is it's often multi-tenant buildings that are often part of a portfolio, and they're doing things like GRESB and other ESG reporting, and getting that certification is helping them do that. So I mean, that's what we see in that market. So there's definitely, not everybody's doing LEED for every single building that exists in Massachusetts, right? That's just not happening. It probably never will.
But I don't think it just because you have an existing building does it preclude you from getting new construction certification.
Right.
Certainly not.
Right.
I think there's adaptations that allow for flexibility in different building types.
Yeah, definitely renovating an existing building can get,
for sure.
We've done
a lot,
multiple projects like that. And the other thing, one of the things that really any of these rating systems do is, even if you don't pursue certification, they're a guideline of these are what the industry is thinking is good practice. You know, LEED, one of the advantages of it is it a consensus document. It's developed by people across the country thinking about what are best practices and trying to put that here. So, you know, it's not necessarily having all the answers, but it's certainly a good starting place if you're trying to understand what are the things that go into that. You know, if you cast back in time to before LEED existed, lots of people made lots of claims about green buildings, and there was kind of no standard thing to compare to. And really, more than anything else, that's what it creates. This is what the state of the art is looking at, and you should be comparing to that, even if you're not ultimately going to get a plaque. There's more important things in the world than getting a plaque. Plaques are cool, but you can.
Are they gonna add a B5 to the plaque?
Yeah. Well, so this is a whole other thing, but yeah, I think that the plaque would say the version and the year, right?
It says the year. I don't think it says the version. We've got one on the way in here.
Well, they certainly should do that. It's a good call. Let's
Yeah.
call Peter and get that worked out.
Well, one thing they are doing, which is they've finally done this, is any project now, even doesn't matter version 4, version 3, whatever, that's certifying now gets a free the
Sticker.
window decal, because that used to cost $200 and people would never do it, and like why
Yeah, people will get free advertising for your building. Like you go get get Energy Star on your building, they send you a sticker, and that costs you maybe $2 to do that. Go get LEED on your building, you just spend $100,000 doing that, and you get to pay extra for a plaque.
I'd go to my favorite ski shop, I'll get a sticker from them for free, like, come on.
Stick it on your bumper and you'll advertise them for the next 100 years,
Oh.
or at least the life of your car. All right. Well, this has been great, and we're going to stick around a little while. Let us be a resource. If you need something, I mean, Amy knows. You don't have to hire us. Just if you got a question, call us. We'll talk, and eventually we'll figure out something we can work on together.
Yeah.